If you open the Holy Quran right now and search from the first page to the very last, you'll find absolutely zero mention of a figure millions of Muslims are actively waiting for, Imam Mahdi. He's not mentioned in the Quran. So where did this figure actually come from? Who first spoke of him? And how did he become one of the most anticipated figures in Islamic tradition? Today, we are tracing the story of the Mahdi from the earliest narrations to the modern day. By the end, you'll have enough evidence to decide for yourself what to believe. Ask almost any Muslim scholar, from New York to Cairo to Kuala Lumpur, who the Mahdi is, and you'll hear a remarkably similar story. Before the Day of Judgment, a man from the family of the Prophet Muhammad will emerge. Not a prophet, because prophethood ended with Muhammad, but a leader chosen to restore justice when the world has sunk into its darkest age. According to the narrations, he'll be a direct descendant of the Prophet through his daughter Fatima. His first name will match the Prophet's own name. His father's name will match the Prophet's father's name. The world he inherits is one consumed by oppression. Believers are persecuted, injustice is everywhere, and hope is fading. Then, everything changes. The traditions say he will fill the earth with justice just as it had been filled with tyranny. Wealth will become so abundant that people will refuse it. Crops will flourish. Rain will fall in abundance. Prosperity will spread in a way the world has never seen. This picture isn't drawn from one source. It's assembled from hundreds of hadiths, sayings and reports attributed to the Prophet, and in some traditions, to his cousin and son-in-law, Ali bin Abu Talib. Some scholars count as many as 500 separate chains of narration on this topic. 500. That number alone is why, for most of Islamic history, nobody seriously questioned whether the Mahdi was coming. With that much smoke, surely there's fire. The belief isn't a fringe idea, either. It sits at the center of Shia theology, where the Mahdi is believed to already be alive, in hiding, waiting to return. In Sunni tradition, he's usually understood as a figure not yet born, a ruler whose reign will overlap with the return of Jesus, who according to the same narrations will descend and pray behind him. And this isn't just theology on paper. Throughout Islamic history, the idea of the Mahdi has moved armies. In late 19th century Sudan, a man named Muhammad Ahmed declared himself the Mahdi and led a revolt that briefly toppled Egyptian-British rule. Movements across South Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East have rallied, more than once, around men claiming this exact title. So the question isn't whether people believe this. Clearly, powerfully, for over a millennium, they have. The real question, the one almost nobody asks out loud, is simpler than it sounds. When we actually go back and open the sources, is the story we've inherited the story that was actually told? Before we can ask whether the Mahdi traditions are authentic, we need to understand how Islamic scholarship evaluates any hadith in the first place. Not every religious teaching reaches Muslims in the same way. The Quran, and the core practices of Islam such as prayer, fasting, and Hajj, are transmitted through what scholars call tawada, mass transmission. They were preserved by such large numbers of people across generations that coordinated fabrication is considered effectively impossible. Hadith work differently. Most individual reports, even those with numerous narrators, fall into the category of kabar al-ahad, or solitary reports. That doesn't mean they are false. It means they don't carry the same level of certainty as mutawadi reports, and therefore have to be investigated. To do that, Muslim scholars developed an entire discipline known as ilm al-rijal, the science of evaluating narrators. Who transmitted the report? Were they trustworthy? Did they actually meet the person they claimed to hear it from? Was the chain complete? Were there contradictions? This painstaking process is what produced collections like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Reports weren't accepted simply because they were popular. They had to survive an extraordinarily rigorous process of scrutiny. So here's where it gets interesting. Scholars have traced the Mahdi narrations back to their actual sources, and the number quoted, that famous 500 narrations, turns out to be misleading in a very specific way. Those 500 aren't 500 separate events. They're 500 chains, branches of transmission, all converging back to the same handful of original reports. When contemporary hadith scholars, working within the same tradition that produced Bukhari and Muslim, trace those 500 chains to their root, they land on reports from just 23 companions of the Prophet. Then apply the actual filtering process, the same isnad criticism used to build the canonical hadith collections, and the number collapses further. The majority of those reports are classified as either weak or outright fabricated, invented stories later attributed to the Prophet, a phenomenon so well documented that entire books exist cataloging known fabrications. What survives rigorous scrutiny is a strikingly small core, roughly 7 distinct incidents, reported by just 4 companions of the Prophet. Not 500 stories. 7. Let's sit with that for a second, because it's the detail the popular narrative skips past. Imam Malik compiled the Muwatta in Medina, the very city where several of these narrations were supposedly circulating. He had access to the generation that learned directly from the companions. Yet in his entire collection, he records not a single hadith about the Mahdi. Bukhari and Muslim, working a generation later, with access to a far wider net of transmission and an even more rigorous filtering method, accepted only the barest outline. A generous, just ruler will come. No name. No lineage. No cosmic significance. No global conquest. Compare that to how the Quran and Sunnah treat something the tradition actually considers essential: the 5 daily prayers, the pilgrimage, the fundamentals of faith. Those concepts are unmistakable, repeated, embedded in the earliest layer of the Quran itself. The Mahdi, by contrast, isn't in the Quran at all, not implied, not alluded to, not once, and even in the Hadith literature, the version with real scholarly standing is a fraction of the version most people have actually been taught to expect. If the surviving evidence is this thin, where did the full-blown apocalyptic figure, the descending savior, the world-conquering caliphate, actually come from? Historians who've studied this, including Ibn Khaldun himself, point to something very human: political crisis breeding hope. The early centuries of Islam were marked by civil war, the collapse of the Umayyad dynasty, and repeated uprisings by descendants of the Prophet's family who felt sidelined from power. Rashid Rida, the influential 20th century Egyptian reformer scholar, argued that many of these narrations emerged specifically to give despairing political movements, the Alawid uprisings among them, something to hope for. Once that hope took hold, storytelling did what storytelling always does: it grew. A vague prophecy about a just ruler picked up detail after detail with each retelling. A name here, a facial feature there, a number of years, a description of prosperity so vivid it became legend. By the time later, less rigorously verified collections were being compiled 2, 3, 4 centuries after the Prophet's death, the modest original prophecy had become something almost unrecognizable. And these doubts aren't new. They don't come from modern skeptics or critics of Islam. They come from within the Islamic tradition itself. The historian Ibn Khaldun famously questioned the strength of the Mahdi narration centuries ago. Rashid Rida revisited many of the same concerns in the modern era. And Muhammad Iqbal, one of the most influential Muslim philosophers of the 20th century, regarded the popular conception of the Mahdi as an idea that had drifted far from the dynamic spirit of Islam. These weren't outsiders attacking the religion. They were Muslim scholars and thinkers applying Islam's own methods of historical and textual scrutiny. And for each of them, the evidence was far less straightforward than popular tradition often suggests. There's one more angle worth sitting with. It's a tension the tradition itself has to answer. The Prophet Muhammad, by Islam's own theology, is the greatest and final messenger God ever sent. And in his own lifetime, with direct divine revelation behind him, he never eliminated oppression from the earth. He ruled, by the end of his life, over a portion of Arabia, not the world. Now hold that against what the fully developed Mahdi tradition expects from a man the tradition itself insists is not a prophet. He's expected to fill the entire earth with justice, unite the whole ummah, end global tyranny, preside over abundance so extreme that people are said to stop even bothering to pick wealth up off the ground. If the most complete messenger God ever sent didn't accomplish that, what exactly are these later narrations claiming for someone holding a lesser station? Some versions even describe God purifying him in a single night, language that brushes right up against the kind of direct divine intervention Islamic theology normally reserves for prophets alone. None of that disproves the modest version, a good, just ruler emerging after hardship, exactly as the strongest surviving narrations describe. But it's very hard to reconcile with the maximalist version most people have actually inherited, a non-prophet expected to finish what the final prophet himself didn't. But step back even further, because there's a deeper problem here, one that isn't about which hadith are authentic at all. It's about what the Quran says its own purpose is. The Quran describes itself as a furqan, a criterion that distinguishes truth from falsehood, right from wrong, justice from injustice. Not a book that promises someone else will eventually come and make that distinction for you. A guide handed directly to every generation, to act on, now. And the Quran is explicit about how change actually happens. In Surah Ar-Ra'd, it states plainly that God does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Not until a chosen figure arrives. Not until history reaches some appointed hour. Until they change. That's a fundamentally different theology than wait for the Mahdi. If the Quran's own framework is that justice is something every generation is responsible for pursuing, in its own era, against its own oppressors, using its own effort, then a belief that outsources that responsibility to a future savior isn't just historically shaky. It runs against the very instruction the Quran gives for how injustice gets undone in the first place. So what do you want to believe in? A promise still waiting to be fulfilled, or a responsibility we've spent centuries waiting to hand off? That's for you to decide.